Good news and bad news, I'm afraid. Let's start with the good news to get the happy feels going. So the good news, of course, is that Bitcoin has surpassed what it was yesterday, and it's kind of bounced back from all the FUD and all the effects of the macro situation in the world. If we look at crypto bubbles in the last week, even though Bitcoin doesn't show, in the last hour, Bitcoin still doesn't show. No, in an hour, you can see Bitcoin making a little bit of a comeback there. That little bubble there is Bitcoin. Let me just move it around so you guys can see. So that's always good to see. Normally, Bitcoin doesn't even show at all on this page, which kind of indicates that it is coming back. Unfortunately, though, the happy feels that brought Bitcoin back, which is the prospect of a ceasefire in the Middle East, has kind of vanished now with there not being a ceasefire. So things are still continuing. Things are still very capricious over there. Here in Europe, we experienced a massive congestion at the airports as a lot of the flights got turned back mid-flight. My cousin, who was away in Austria, had her flight cancelled because, her plane couldn't take off. Haven't sat on the plane for a couple of hours delay. On the plane itself, with the engine running, the pilot had to switch the engine off. Everyone get out, let's fly tomorrow if we can. Because, of course, they had to prioritize planes that were already in the air. So everything heading to the Middle East, be it, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, even like going to India and Pakistan, they have to fly over that whole region, were turned back mid-flight. So absolute mayhem and catastrophe at the airports. Shout out to those people who had to go through all that sort of stuff, man. I don't know. But things are getting better now with some of the congestions clearing off, and my cousin has safely landed at Heathrow Airport, one of the busiest, if not the busiest airport in the world. That alone, even that sort of delays and cancellations and all those things are definitely terrible for the economy. First of all, a lot of businesses were affected by cancelled flights, returned flights, yada yada. Also, the economy at the airport heavily affected. Also, the economy of those countries, like it's summer now. Many of those countries depend on tourism. Dubai is a major one. The tourism industry is being massively impacted by what's going on right now. Obviously, trade between us and Asia also massively affected. We haven't seen the impact of the ships yet. We're still seeing the impact of like delayed flights, but soon enough we're going to feel the impact of ships not arriving on time, orders from China taking much longer if you're buying things online on websites like Temu or Alibaba, and even like on a larger scale, retail stores, supermarkets, just general things like that. And then the oil prices doing their thing. So that's a mix of good news, bad news. But the good news, the silver lining of that, is that Bitcoin has stayed resilient even amidst all of that, probably because of a combination of things. First of all, of course, industry institutions are still buying Bitcoin, so the ETFs are still experiencing inflows because the end game for those guys is a longer term thing. They're looking at decades down the line when Bitcoin enters the millions in terms of price, and they're capitalizing on it from now and hunkering down for the many years to come. Of course, the second thing is Bitcoin being seen as some kind of safe haven. Some people are running to Bitcoin to try and secure some of their funds. Some people are going into Bitcoin to move their funds away from the area. And a lot of that, of course, is going to obviously trickle to XRP when the time comes, especially in the Middle East, where XRP is one of the only recognized tokens, one of the only properly regulated tokens, and one of the only actually available tokens to buy in some of these places. So shout out to that. Terrible news though when it comes to crypto and people storing coins on their wallets and stuff. Kaspersky, which is a well-known antivirus company, has discovered something called SparkKitty. It's a Trojan horse to spy on your phones, and these are embedded in bogus apps on the App Store and Google Play. So if you use iOS or Android, you are not safe. Gone are the days, by the way, when the App Store was so secure that you didn't have to worry about this stuff. But the App Store is exactly the same now. Not exactly the same, but it's just Google Play and Android apps, a complete minefield when it comes to viruses and stuff. It's the wild west because it's not as monitored as the App Store. But apparently this Trojan has found its way also onto the App Store. So Kaspersky researchers have discovered a new Trojan spy called SparkKitty, which targets smartphones on iOS and Android. It sends images from an infected phone and information about the device to the attackers. This malware was embedded in apps related to crypto and gambling, as well as in a Trojanized TikTok app. I use TikTok, but my TikTok app is very, very old. I've never updated it. I hardly ever update apps until absolutely necessary, when they kick me off the app. And that's one thing I've been actually quite critical of crypto apps. Crypto apps like crypto.com and what's the other one? Exodus. They're constantly getting you to update. Now, a lot of the times it's not because they're fixing any problems. They're just adding features left, right, and center, feature creep. And sometimes, you can't even get into the app unless you update. They force an update. Now, while that might be good because, they're working on the code constantly, sometimes people getting used to installing and reinstalling and updating crypto-related apps can soften them for this sort of attack. Now, someone like me, I never update my apps until it's absolutely necessary. I'm not as susceptible to this sort of stuff as some people would be. But as we enter the era of mass adoption, where people just click without actually reading terms and conditions or having a proper look at what they're doing, this TikTok generation where it's just swipe, 2 seconds, swipe, low attention span, no attention to detail. People are just sort of walking around like zombies. It's going to be extremely easy to hack people, right? These are apps, these Trojan horses are sitting in apps like TikTok and whatever, are going to be very successful at stealing people's data, right? Already we saw that breach with 16 billion accounts compromised. That's just the world we live in right now. And as more and more people with less and less technical know-how start to use crypto wallets, etc., it's going to be an absolute bonanza for these guys, right? So this is an example of an app on iOS that, people just download. And can I just say, like, back in the beginning of this whole iOS thing, right? If I saw an app like this with, no star rating, things are written in Chinese. I mean, if you can read that's all well and good. But like, people used to have these adverse reactions to anything that wasn't written in English with a 4.5 star minimum, that's been around for ages, well vetted. Even Apple themselves probably would just delete this app after a while if it was just so poorly rated. But now, if you look at the App Store, because of greed and just, I guess, the thing has just got so large now that the curation has gone to hell, man. And people are happy to download an app like this. I mean, I look at this and I feel dirty just looking at this app. Terrible rating, 1 star complaint in a language I don't understand. Why the heck will I click on this? But people click, people download, because it offers them, I don't know, free tokens, airdrop, whatever. People download TikTok that's compromised, that's, TikTok or TikTok with a CK. Like, how do these apps even make it onto the platform in the first place? So what it does, it takes a snapshot, it sends pictures as you type in your phrase, your key phrase, your password. It might even install a keylogger onto your system. And, once it's on your system and your system is compromised, it's easy for these things to send information back to the hackers, and then they have you. And unfortunately, because crypto is still highly unregulated, which is actually good from other people's point of view, they're able to disappear with your money, man. At least with traditional finance, you have some protections, some insurance, some of your money is protected by the banks. They will return your money if you got hacked and it wasn't your fault or whatever, or they can trace people better. But with crypto, someone could be sitting in North Korea or, in Alabama or whatever, in his bedroom, a basement somewhere, and just steal your money remotely and then just disappear forever. What are you going to do? How are you going to catch them? The money's gone. How do you prove that it was yours? How do you prove you didn't do it? So be extremely careful. These apps, man, especially if you're using wallets on your phone or your browser, you're clicking on fake websites telling you to download stuff to clean your Mac and all these things. We're entering an era of, steal my stuff. Personally, I have a host of different hardware wallets, a combination of phone wallets, websites, browsers, centralized exchanges, etc. And I have my stuff distributed across multiple zones. Now, I could do a video about hardware wallets. I've seen a couple of requests about that. People asking me which ones are safe, which ones aren't. I can't tell you which ones are safe, to be honest with you, because, they could be safe and then something might happen in the background. Who knows? Government level, state sponsored hackers could perhaps get into your stuff. There's nothing I can do about that. I can only say that, I use this. So I might do a video about that. If you're interested, let me know in the comment section. I also have some actual companies reaching out to me in the background, trying to get me to work with them, have a look at their hardware wallet. But, in this day and age, again, it's hard to trust companies that aren't well known, people I haven't heard of. With these bespoke wallets, who knows what's built into the wallet, we just have to be careful these days. Anyway, not financial advice, do your own research.